It's interesting because so much of what you've been experimenting with is, I'll call it this sort of outsourcing of thinking, outsourcing of thought. Like, for instance, the year of living biblically, you can essentially outsource what your actions and your opinions based on what you can outsource it to the Bible. So if the Bible says don't kill someone, then that's how you decide not to kill somebody. Other than deciding internally that that's something you probably don't want to do.
Right.
Or in the know-it-all, you're able to outsource your entire knowledge of facts to the Encyclopedia Britannica. And in a radical honesty is another example where you can outsource decision making to the simple thing of, well, am I being as honest as I possibly can or not?
I love that. That is such a good insight. And I think there is something to that. I think living by a system, and you do this in your books, you sort of give people, here are the 30 best rules for being an entrepreneur. You give them a system, and it can be really helpful. I am a huge fan of freedom of choice, of course, but there's also lots of studies that you probably know about that if you have too much freedom of choice, if The Paradox of Choice is a great book, then you're not as happy. So sort of narrowing your options so you're a little bit happier. Freedom.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge believer in that, just because and you roughly refer to it again in that same chapter in My Life as an Experiment, where we have all these evolutionary biases. The brain is basically a primitive tool just so that humans, which are kind of in the middle of the food chain, like we're not stronger than lions, and we're probably stronger than some birds, but we're like in the middle of the food chain. So we developed this brain in order to move to the top of the food chain, but it's essentially just a tool, and yet we let it rule our lives. I'd much rather think as little as possible so that I could be a fully developed human instead of a human controlled by my brain.
True. Overthinking, I think, is. I think you've talked about this in your book. Overthinking is a dangerous thing.
And you talk about it as well. Like you did an experiment where you outsourced almost everything in your life, including arguments with your wife. You outsourced to India.
Oh, it was one of the greatest months of my life. I mean, this was a long time ago. This was like 10 years ago, and outsourcing had just begun. And I read about it, and I thought it sounded great, and I was like, why don't I just apply it to my life? So I hired a team of people in Bangalore, India, to do everything for me. So they answered my emails and answered my phone, and as you say, they argued with my wife for me, and it was wonderful because I just got to do what I loved, which was read and think about things that were not trivial or minor. But there was an article about a month ago in the New York Times that I thought was very interesting about how outsourcing your personal life actually makes a lot of economic sense, because you are able to think of bigger picture ideas that might earn you a lot more money than the $15 an hour that you're spending having someone type in your phone numbers to your database. So I am a big fan. Personally, the irony is I'm not a great delegator, but I know how important it is, so I force myself to do it.
So take me as an example. What should I be outsourcing in my life? Like, I tend to do a lot of my own crap all the time. What should I think about outsourcing to be more productive?
Well, yeah, I mean, your life is great. I don't see why you need my advice, but you, I try to outsource things like even online shopping. It seems like it doesn't take a lot of time, but if you give someone a list of things you need and they do it, it's just a liberating feeling. And transcribing interviews, I've learned to outsource that. I used to sort of be embarrassed because a lot of times when you interview people, you sound like an idiot. But listen, it is so worth it to pay that $15 an hour to have someone type up your notes, because that saves you like 3 hours in your day, and think of how much you can accomplish in those 3 hours.
Yeah, no, that's really true. I agree. Like right now, I've actually hired somebody to examine the ways I can outsource. So I've outsourced.
Great.
Figuring out how I can outsource.
Outsourcing your outsouring. I love it.
Because I had no idea what to outsource. Like, I don't know what to do to change my habits. I'm also not a good delegator, so I didn't know what to do. So I basically outsourced the ability to figure out what I need to delegate.
That is brilliant.
That's what happens.
I love it. Well, one of my favorite reactions to that book was, that article, it ran in Esquire, and Guy said that he had lost his job to outsourcing, and he was understandably very bitter. So he decided to outsource his job search. So he hired someone in Bangalore, India, to find a job for him, and it worked. He found a job. That's
great. What did they do? Like, submit his resume everywhere?
I guess so. I don't know. They scoured Monster.com or looked on. I don't even know. But it was successful.
Well, right now you have a column in Esquire where people ask you. It's like an advice column where people ask you questions, and you essentially outsource it to your 100,000 Facebook fans. And how's that working out?
Right. It's one of my favorite projects that I'm working on. And it is, it's called The Huddled Masses, and I crowdsource advice. So someone will write in and say, my girlfriend, her arms are too hairy, and I don't know how to tell her. And then my Facebook friends will weigh in. They're so shallow. So that's one reaction. And but then there are also other people who say, give her a gift certificate to a spa and have her have the masseur outsource. They often say outsource the difficult conversation to the woman in the person giving the massage. But so it is wonder. I think crowdsourcing is hugely helpful in some situations. Not in every situation. There are limits. But I am a big fan of the wisdom of crowds in some situations.
So essentially we live in a highly specialized society, and chances are for any one topic, you're probably not the expert, and there probably is someone to outsource who is an expert in that subject.
That's so true.